Let's talk a bit about persuading the bear, persuading the organizational bear. How can we lead without authority? There'll be some questions and answers, so you might want to look around you and find maybe some paper and a pen or pencil, because I will ask you to do some note capturing. All right, so right ahead, why persuading the bear? Because product people, they could be product managers, product owners, anyone that deals with scoping in an agile environment must persuade all the time and influence all the time. They need to influence everyone, everywhere, and all the time. And that's a recurring pattern. And that's why influence without authority is so important, and being able to persuade the organizational bear. How to influence virtually. Actually, we're going to talk a bit more about, because of COVID and the fact we're all remote, we're going to talk a bit about influencing remote. If you happen to be in one of Agile in Ireland previously, I had a workshop there that was face-to-face. We're not in a face-to-face environment anymore, not in Kansas, so we will need to interact in remote, probably a foreseeable future. About me, a few words. First off, on the screen, you'll find QR codes. Feel free to snap them. That way you can get the links there easier with your phone. How do I help clients? I'm a big proponent, big believer in simple and learning fast and liberating teams, especially remote teams, to happiness using liberating structures. And I have a YouTube channel. Feel free to check it out. I talk a lot about liberating structures. I think product owners, product managers, agile product people can do a lot with liberating structures to influence others. More on that later. So take a minute or even two, and I'll be quiet. It's hard for me to do that. I'll be quiet for a minute or two, and I want you to reflect individually, of course. What are your top 3 influence methods or hacks? How do you influence people? And if you can do that and then share in the chat, that'll be awesome. If you can do that, I don't want to share in chat, that's fine as well. I'll give you a couple of minutes, and I'll be quiet here, bring myself some water. What are your 3 influence hacks? I'll give you a few more seconds there. All right. So keep these in mind, because we are going to talk about those a bit. Oh, I love reciprocity. We'll talk about reciprocity. So one of the big ones, because it's ingrained in human behavior. So thanks. Any other there? One-on-one before meeting works very nicely. Yeah, that's always works. And we'll talk about that in the context of liberating structures in a bit. Any other ones, Craig? People liking you and good relationship. Yes, that's research data. And showing research data. That's, by the way, there's the book, The Psychology of Influence by Cialdini. There are 6 like basic big influence patterns. We're not talking about those today because they're kind of well known, and I see some of you mentioned that. Liking is one of them. Reciprocity is another. Commitment and consistency is another one there. Right? Give, receive favors. Reciprocity is a big thing. If you think about it, reciprocity is the basic of human behavior, of human interaction, and it's very, very innate in our interaction in societies. Of course, being prepared to help, getting references from influential people. Another one of those 6 influence patterns from the Cialdini book is that you have higher authority, right? Authority from another person gives you influence power. So all great comments. I really appreciate that. So you mentioned reciprocity, you mentioned commitment, consistency, you mentioned authority. again, a big one. Social proof, other people saying, hey, this is right, this is another influence pattern. So thank you for that. Let's continue and keep these in mind again as we move forward. So why persuading the bear? Persuading the bear, it's really a story about influence. And it's a meeting I had with a grizzly bear in Alaska, like 30 years ago. And we were hiking, the three of us, in Denali National Park, off the beaten path, kind of. And we pitched up our tents, and we were miserable because Alaska, unlike the pictures, is usually dreary, rainy, and cold, even in summer. So we pitched our tents. I was in the tent changing. The other guy, Erez, was in his tent. And the third guy, Barak, was standing outside. He was kind of a joker. And he was then saying, like, halfway through, he was saying, hey, guys, there's a bear here. And because he was like this funny guy, he was a joker, a comedian, we were like, yeah, of course, it's Alaska. There are many bears. And then he said, no, there's a bear here. And we could hear in his sound that something's wrong. And we said, well, where is it? He said, and he said, it's on this side of the lake. And I said, what? Because we were about 4 meters away from the shore of that small lake in miserable, dreary Denali National Park. And then we said, what is he doing? The bear, of course. We didn't know it's a he or a she. And the bear, he didn't answer us, because then he started doing into the routine of what you do if you meet a bear in the wild in Alaska. And that is speaking in a low kind of calm voice and saying, go away, bear. Only he was saying it lech mipodov, which is in Hebrew for go away, bear. And he was waving his hands like this. And then the three of us were out there. Erez was in his underwear, aiming the pepper spray to the bear. It was a young grizzly, meaning like 250 pounds probably. We know it was a young grizzly because the rangers told us later on. And he was trudging along on this side of the lake, about 3.5 meters away from us. Erez was aiming. The only thing Erez forgot was to remove the trigger from the pepper spray. And the bear was looking at us like that, kind of saying, what are these folks doing? Luckily, maybe he thought we weren't kosher or something, and he just trudged along. And then the funny thing is, it's very hard to know what to do when you meet a bear in the wild. By the way, that's a really footprint of that bear, paw print of this bear from Alaska, Denali National Park. And the interesting thing is, you get into the park, you get this long list of things you have to do if you meet a bear. And it differs between a black bear and a grizzly bear. The problem is sometimes young black bears are a bit grizzlish in their color, and mature female grizzly bears can look a bit to the black hue. So it's hard to know. And this hard to know is problematic. And as I've moved to the organizational business world, I had my master's in my civil engineering bachelor and my master in industrial engineering. I started working in organization, initially as an employee, then as a consultant for many years. I noticed that these are recurring patterns that happen in organizations that kind of reflect what I saw with the bear. The problem with bears, you don't know if it's a black or brown bear, and you need to adapt according to the situation. It's a tricky call. And the same is true for organizations. How so? Well, reflect, look back on those ideas, your influence patterns, and ask yourself, do they get you the outcomes and results you need? Sometimes, all the times, with the same people, right? Are they enough for you? Do they answer your needs every time with everyone? So think about that for a minute. See if you can answer these 3 questions individually. Maybe share your thoughts in the chat as well. Are your influence methods, patterns, approaches enough? Do they always get the outcomes you want? Maybe sometimes, maybe it's the same people. Think about that for a minute. All right, so I don't know what you're, maybe I will wait for a minute for Craig to forward me some of the chat responses or to my questions? Craig, any chat responses there? Not always. Feels like I may be influencing at the wrong level. Thank you. That's a powerful statement. Thank you. Only response at the moment. Well, from how many people? That's a question, Craig. So while you're counting them and responding to that, here's one of the insights I've had, and then it goes back all the way to that very confusing comments or approaches to handle bears in the wild. We humans, we have the same influence. But oh, nice! I have some others. The people in the room already have their minds made up. More successful with my peers. Yeah, and this kind of goes to speak to the same thing. We humans, we have the same influence patterns we're comfortable with, and have been. This is like we have an influence go-to strategy. In other words, we have like this is how we influence, and it's very hard for us to move away from that. Usually, our influence strategy works well with our peers, and the answer, of course, we'll have in about 20 minutes. And the funny thing is that often it gets the same result as the same people. And there are some psychological reasons to that. And most often we miss out on the opportunities to grow by changing, increasing, and alternating the influence. So we seldom think of influence as a growth skill. We actually don't think about our influence skills that much. And thanks for the chat. Thanks for adding that, Craig. Okay, got it. So we have, thanks, Greg. So the challenge we have is that we rarely think of influencing as a skill that we can grow. We're stuck in the same, and we don't think about our influencing strategy explicitly. We think about it implicitly. And the question is, what can we do about that? Well, I'll start giving you some pointers for the next 30 minutes, what you could do about that to bring it more to your awareness and to be a better influencer and persuading different bears, brown bears, black bears. You can't persuade polar bears, they'll just out to get you. So just like in the real organization where some of them are just polar bears, there's nothing you can do about that. That's just accepting reality. So first, I'll be sharing two crucial tips for virtual influence in virtual remote teams. Number one is, I'm sitting here now in Boston, Massachusetts. Each and every one of you is sitting in a different space. And we don't think about remote environments, how different they are, and the fact that most of us people, we consume the remote environment, the physical environment, much more than anything else. You know, Meta is now trying to change that. I don't know if they'll be able to, because we are creatures of our here and now. We like to think we're not, meaning my immediate environment, the three windows I'm seeing outside, it's a bit windy, kind of chilly in Boston, the room that's in front of me, the glass of water they hear, this here and now is much more profound and has much more influence on me than whatever is happening in the small window or camera on the laptop, or even if I'm engulfed in that with a lively Zoom interaction. The brain processes information differently in virtual. And many times the problems we have is that in the virtual, we like to think that actually what we say makes a difference. It does, but it's very diluted. So if you want to influence in the virtual, you need to take proactive breaks in your response. They call it pause, breathe, think, and respond, rather than think, respond, and using the right words, of course. So we need to be much more cognizant of our vocabulary, of the way we respond in the virtual, because we have a much smaller, limited window of influencing. And many times the way to influence in remote is using the structure of the meeting in a profound way, such as with liberating structures. Again, more on that a bit later. So the first one is in virtual, we need to understand the influence happens differently. And the question is, of course, how do I influence anyways at a given situation? You know, we talk now a lot about Twitter creating an echo chamber, Facebook, Instagram, they're all echo chambers. And then when we're at work, many times we work with product people. I work with a team, right? Devs, they're a certain different echo chamber. Leadership, a different one, right? Maybe HR, maybe my stakeholders outside. I move between echo chambers. Now, if I was just a developer, mostly I'll be interacting with my own echo chamber, the people who think like me, who studied the same things that I did, who probably had the same kind of upbringing many times as I did. However, for product people, the problem is we keep moving between echo chambers, and for us, it means we need to behave more like chameleons. But maybe it's not the right metaphor. More adaptive to the way that the people we're interacting with view the environment. Again, it's remote, it's harder, so you need to let people talk. I think one of the biggest mistakes that I see product people making is that they think they have the honors, they have to lead the meeting, while in many times they have to let people in remote environments, even more so because you don't have the context to let people share their thoughts, ideas, interactions, and be more on the, pause, break, listen, and then analyze, think, and then respond, which is different again than what you have a more lively conversation in a face-to-face environment. We like to think that there is like this reality that is created when we interact with people. This cannot be more further than the truth, and I can actually prove it to you. If you're in the US, you can put one screen, doesn't matter your political affiliations, of course, one screen on TV or one other screen on CNN, the other in Fox News, listen to what you're talking, and you could argue that probably none of them are actually talking about any reality. I think we see it a lot now with COVID, that there are different realities that people decide to kind of adhere to, and it doesn't matter what the truth is. And I think this is really interesting because we are living through this. We think there's a truth based on the reality we decide to live with, but it's not there. And I think that one of the biggest problems we have now is like this dichotomy between vaxxer and anti-vaxxer. Was actually, there is a continuum there, and you see people who, the way they see it, people who take vaccines, the way that other people don't take vaccines see it, creates such a rift that it's very hard for us to move away between echo chambers. Well, for product people, you have to move away. We have to move between echo chambers, and that means you have to be a much better listener in order to understand the reality of the your counterpart as you work with them. Another problem, mistake, or limitation we have is that we think that we can influence everyone all the time, and we need to be a bit more, I guess, have more humility around that, because if I'd ask you, let's say you're in a room of 10 people, and on average, how many people are in total agreement with you? They love whatever you say, they'll agree. You'll probably say about 10%, which is not like one or two people. And those who completely disagree with you, how many of them are there? Well, they're probably one or two people. Right? And what about everyone else? They're sitting on the fence, so to speak. They're maybe paying lip service. They want to see how things progress. So what do we normally do? Psychologically speaking, what people normally think about that, you had a room of 10, think about it for 10 seconds. Who would you address your influence kind of approach to? Those who are completely against you, those who are all for you, or those in the middle? Honestly, many people will go for those who are completely against them. And the reason, if we can ask, why do they do that? How come? And the response is because, remember, liking, we want to be liked by people. And we don't like that people are completely opposed to our ideas, because we get married. We, especially product people as well, get married to our ideas. And if you listen to other presentations today by all those great product people, they keep saying that we need to find more objective metrics and do more experimentation, because otherwise product people tend to fall in love with our ideas and solution. And then if there's a meeting and someone opposes our idea, we take it personally. Now, if you think about that, there's no way you can convince someone who's completely opposed to whatever you're suggesting, because they can do that on a myriad kind of many various reasons. None of them, some of them have nothing to do with who you are and your idea. And remember, in a remote setting, the immediate environment, maybe they have annoying kids who stayed at home. They can't go to school. So that's a big influencer in their ability to like your idea. Usually the best way for product people to influence a group of people or a team is to work with the people who are sitting on the fence and show them a way to move towards agreement. The people who are all for you, it doesn't make sense to work with them because they're all for you no matter what you say. So you want to focus on those who are somewhere in the middle, because you really can't influence people who are your opposition. At most, you can move people like 2 steps this ladder. Move someone who's very opposed to more against than for, or very opposed to neutral, and so on. And just being appreciative of that is our ability to impact a certain environment. So let's think about again about this group of 10 people, and if we think about this in a diagram of trust and agreement, a 2x2. So in this 2x2, you have people who have high trust and low trust, high agreement and low agreement. Again, your allies with high trust and high agreement, they're already your allies. So yeah, you could convince them, right? That's those people you find easiest to influence because they're already your allies. That's not where you want to direct your attention. You have people who are your high trust and low agreement. These are people who you can discuss the merit of your conversation with. These could be your opponents, but it's actually good because if you bring them hardy evidence, well, the vaccine works, but there's high trust, you can convince them, right? Or the vaccine doesn't work. I don't want to take any political side here. I'm just saying these are people who you have trust. If you have trust with somebody, if you have trust with the government, you can agree on how you influence one another. The problem starts when you have low trust. Low trust, either with those who are in agreement, paying lip service, or those who are in low trust and low agreement, your adversaries. And the problem is many times we put too much effort on the adversaries. And actually, by the way, you can see that again playing now with the government and people who do not want to. I keep going to that because that's like the most profound thing we can see now in terms of influencing and how governments bang their head against the wall with choosing the wrong influence approach with groups of people. And this is a recurring pattern. Governments always do that because governments basically are made up with people who sometimes just don't know how to influence well. Anyways, just putting that aside, right? So all I'm saying here is for product people, you need to figure out which group are you sending your efforts or targeting your efforts. Because I don't need to convince the squirrels out in my backyard. But if there is like a skunk or if there's like a small bear, I probably need to be better at influencing that bear. So again, the thinking process here is to target your influencing style to those who are somewhere in between. Either you have high trust with them, or even if you have low trust, how can you create trust with them? Many times, okay, let me take a deep breath and say something. I'll probably repeat twice more. More often than not, people who influence leaders, scrum masters, team members, parents, children, product managers, product owners, people who influence pay too much attention to the text and too little attention to the subtext. In other words, we think that the words that we use matter, and actually the words that we use actually don't matter as much as how we use them, how we create the environment to agreement, and how do we influence the environment to agreement. So let's think about that for a minute in the following set of slides, and I'll explain what that looks like. I keep saying liberating structures. So if you don't know what liberating structure is, snap that QR code. I have a YouTube channel that talk a lot about them. In remote environments, the worst thing a product person or any person can do is have an hour meeting with a group of 10 people and discuss, which is 99% of our meetings. If you want to influence people in face-to-face, but even more so in remote environments, you got to pre-think the structure of the meeting. By creating the right structure, you'll get much better results and agreement. How? By using liberating structures. These are micro practices, microstructure to engage a group of people to create. Sometimes it's happiness, right? If you want to create powerful connections, if you want to create agreement, you want to influence people, getting a group of stakeholders. It could be from the business, could be your team members. I mean, you're doing agile or anything, right? And using an hour to talk about anything is the worst use of your time if everybody's staying in the room and just flipping PowerPoint or whatever. For example, you can do impromptu networking for the first 5 minutes and pose an interesting question for them that gets you to your agreement. But you can also set breakout rooms to discuss whatever it is you need to discuss. Maybe it's a sprint planning session, maybe it's a set of requirements, maybe it's features on the roadmap with your executives, right? Who said that all 7 executives need to sit down and review your roadmap together for an hour and a half? What if you created breakout rooms and you knew who's in the breakout rooms to create maximum influence by pre-assigning who's going to sit with whom in the breakout rooms? So that way you can actually put aside your biggest detractors in a room that doesn't have a lot of importance, but your CEO or CFO or CIO or VP of engineering or VP of product, they sit in the room with the people who support you the most. You need to create the structure to support the decision. I'll repeat this again. Create this, doesn't matter what you say, it matters what you do and how you create the structure to influence. And if you use breakout rooms smartly, you can actually impact the influence process much, much more robustly than if you have the biggest set of arguments. And actually, if you let people work through a question rather than tell them the answer, they'll be much more bought into whatever it is you want to convince them. The hard part, or I guess the way where I coach people, where I coach product people to create these settings is by putting forth the right question. And the right question is never a yes or no question. And again, it's one of the biggest mistakes of people who are trying to influence. You don't want to lead a person to a yes or no question. I'll repeat that again. You do not, right? You want to move people to a place where they already, by definition, accepted your proposal, and now they're discussing aspects of the proposal. That's like any great politician would do, right? You don't want to move them away to, oh, do I take the vaccine or not take the vaccine, for example. You need to move them to a place where they discuss the how and the merits of that specific how and give them leeway in what they do. And I'm not going to jump back because I have some ideas about what that looks like in our real environment. But in your product environment, what would that look like? If you think about that for a minute, what does that mean for your influence interactions? What would that look like in your influence interactions? What questions? Think about that for a minute. What question could you ask a subset of a group of people and you need to influence them that would create better results for and you better influencing for maybe your executives, or maybe it's a team that you need of engineers you need work from. You need them to think about that for a minute. What would that look like? And of course, the one-day workshop, we take more time for these. However, again, let me repeat that. If you go into a meeting and you haven't thought about the structure and you pose a yes or no question that the meeting could completely, a no would be completely obliviate whatever effort you've done in the last half year, you have not created the right structure and the right set of questions for your meetings. You might as well cancel a meeting because it'd be a waste of time, especially if the answer would be no. So 2 things, think about the structure. And again, it's more important virtual. Think about the structure of your meeting, use some literary structures, maybe a 1, 2, 4 all, maybe TRIZ. Look up all these things. They're awesome. They're a great way for you to impact it, to influence others, to get to yes. The structure of the meeting and how you use micro practices to engage others, and also the question you use to move away from a yes or no binary response to how can we do this together as a question. All right, so the next thing is your engaging strategy. We have something very profound, devious at the same time, is that because we've been using the same influence strategy for many years, we all kind of get hung to a certain communication style and approach. And when we use wider audiences, we still use the same type of words, but maybe those wider audiences aren't really hung up to the same words. Let me explain what I mean. Let's look at this for example. And this is another one of those 2x2 psychological related models. You've probably seen similar. many other places. I use this when I like it. So if we kind of map people's responsiveness and directiveness on these two axes, there are people who are more high assertive, high control force, and people who are more high sensitive feeling in relationship. And then we can create a very rough modeling. And it's just a model, right? People aren't one in specifically one of those, but they have tendencies. We all have tendencies. You have people who are more process driven. You have people who are more action driven, the PMs. Maybe POs as well. You have people who are more people driven, and right, your software developers probably fall into process many times. It's not that just process, just the way the model is a way for us to think about an abstract reality. It's just a way to help us reflect about reality, how we can influence and communicate better. And you have those idea people, concepts, creativity. Now, the funny thing is we kind of fall to one of those fall quadrants. Each and every one of us has like a major modality of how we interact with people. And it's very powerful. It's actually sometimes over kind of all-encompassing. For example, people style people, those who are less directive and more responsive, they have a certain set of energy, a certain type of energy. They have a certain set of actions that they prefer. They have a set of words that they like using. And I'm sure that if you read emails from your HR team, you'll notice that they are using some sort of vocabulary that when you read that mail, you'll know, oh, that's mail. That mail came from HR. I know it came from HR because I have all those words that I associate with HR, because HR usually are people-related people, right? And then you have cultures that are more people related and professions that are more people related. Now, it's not, again, moving away from generalization, but actually doing the generalization, because we need some sort of abstract modeling to help understand what happens to us when we're trying to influence others who are away from our comfort zone. Comfort zone here being the people we like to communicate and we're successful influencing. Going back to that feedback I got like 25 minutes ago from someone saying, yeah, it's easy to influence my peers. Why is it easy to influence my peers? Because if I'm a product person, maybe an idea style person, and I like to inspire people to create those visions, I like to connect and envision, I have a set of keywords, right? Innovation, potential, and there you find these in cultures, in different cultures, right? So now there's nothing right or wrong in any of these. It's just these are our preferences to influence others. I happen to be an idea person. I know I'm an idea person, and yet it's hard for me to move away from my idea vocabulary, because if I hear the word opportunity, I'm like, I'll lighten up. Hey, where, right? Opportunity. And then you got those process people, right? They like to debate. They're moving at the actions are proposing and reasoning. There's a set of keywords that they like facts, detail, procedures. You'll find them in different cultures. Again, generalizing here. And for example, your QA folks, when I'm an idea person and they're QA folks, I just can't stand it. I'm just kidding. No, really, it's harder for me to work with someone who's my immediate like orthogonal. They're down there, and even though I'm aware of that, it's still hard for me, right? And then we have those folks who are action style, right? Your PMs mostly, the project managers, some dev managers you'll find, CEOs tend to be. And they like bargaining and moving against. Like, think about when you're in a room with your senior executives, they like the bargaining. They like saying, oh, this would never work, or this works, or we'll never agree to, right? There's a certain behavior, right? And it's about results and objectives and deals and challenges and decisions. And you find them in different cultures and different behaviors. And I think that understanding that this exists, right? We want to understand that this exists. Different people have different styles. That's number one. Okay, what does that mean for me? Well, for me, I need to understand that if I'm an idea person and I speak with people who care more about facts and data, I can put that presentation for an hour. And remember, we don't want to speak on a presentation for an hour for 15 people without doing some breakouts, but that's beside the point. If I speak my words, the only person I'm going to influence and persuade is myself. So if I want to influence people who are from different quadrants, I need to start thinking about my messaging. Now, look at your emails, not now, but maybe later on, and start looking at the emails that you respond and see if there are words that you keep using, and actually I'll bet you there are words, because that's how we operate. That's why we're limited in our influencing skills, because we use the same set of words, the same set of vocabulary, the same set. What if you started alternating the words you use with the different people based on their preference? What if you started using different words for different people, right? If you work with developers, maybe they're not so much action, but maybe the dev lead, they are, right? And maybe you're working with HR and saying, oh, this is a great opportunity and we need people staying here a longer time because this is so important. Maybe that wouldn't convince them so much as if you used words that HR likes to hear more, right? Maybe the words is, if we work on this together, it will increase team spirit and connectivity between people, right? So if you think about the messaging that you hear in organizations, one of the problems, by the way, it's one of the problems of breaking silos, of working in flow across silos, because people are in the silo that they feel comfortable with, right? Devs and QA and PMs, right? It's because there's a certain, now it's not that, the funny thing, people will say, okay, so how does this happen? It's not that people are born all like in a certain way, and then they say, oh, I'm a more people-oriented person, I'll go and study whatever it is I study, or I'm a software engineer, I'll go and study more. No, it's the other way around. People have a certain inclination, and understanding that inclination, right? The inclination gets them to that group. It's not the other way. It's not like once you become a person in HR, then you start adopting this key. No, you've always probably used those set of words because that's your comfort zone. And the question is, how do you get away from your comfort zone and adopt other people's vocabulary? You start with yourself, because the change starts with you or me. So look at your emails, see which words, look at your PowerPoint presentation, see which you normally use, and then start tweaking them based on what other people would want to hear as you're working and influencing a group. Influencing is a two-way street. As you're influencing others, you become influenced as well. So it's not I influence you, as we influence each other at the same time. The only thing you need to do as a product person is create the environment for that to happen, a community of influence, if you will. All right, so let's be mindful of 5 words. I call these NLP, neuro-linguistic programming words. Why do we want to be mindful? And just think about that for a minute. Reflect for a minute for each word. Let's start with why. Think about, what's the problem? Why am I saying we need to be careful with the word why? Well, first off, if you ask someone, why wasn't this done? What type of response can they give you? Why is past facing? It's not for, it's like if I'll ask my then teenage son, why did you drop the glass of milk on the floor? What could they say? What could he say? So because I wanted to upset you, right? Because you're a nut, right? Would tell me, right? Why is problematic. Now, I'm not talking about 5 whys. I'm talking about posing a question as a why does not allow for the future. It allows for the past, and there's not a lot of opportunity you're giving that person or team to really respond. So be careful when you're asking why. How about when you do try? Someone tells you ask someone, will this be done? And they'll say, well, we'll try. We'll try. What are they actually saying? Of course, they're saying it's not going to be done because they're trying. It's like Yoda saying right now in Star Wars, there's either you do it or you don't. There's no try. So try is a way for us to mask the possibility or likely possibility that it will fail. So either you do it or you don't. I'm not talking about experimentation, right? Experimentation is different. You run an experiment and the experiment has results. You're not trying to run an experiment. You're actually running an experiment, an hypothesis, and you get feedback. You're not trying to run a hypothesis. You're actually running an hypothesis. What about but? Yes, why generates a defensive response. Thank you, Margaret. Appreciate that. What about but? So my daughter came from school and she got, or my son the other day, he got 95 in a college exam. I said, well, 95 is nice, but why didn't you get 100? This is a running joke in our family from based on, my mother-in-law used to ask that for my spouse and to my spouse when she was young. That the but completely negates everything that you've said before. This is a great solution, product owner. This is a great solution, team. But the minute you said but, the but completely, don't use the but, right? It negates the first part of the sentence. So I'm not saying stop using those words. I'm just saying, know that when you're using the words, something happens to your influencing abilities. And that's the important part. You can use why, try, but as long as you're understanding what you're doing with those words. What about should? Think about 10 seconds about the word should. What's the issue with the word should? Should is a nasty one. Should can be biased. Yeah, I like that. What else? Well, first off, should is how our society is. Should builds our society. Thou in German it's like man muss, the person must, right? Should is how we create society. Well, if we use shoulds too much, when I say, well, when I come home, let's say I come home from overseas. I used to travel a lot. I haven't for a while now. I used to travel a lot for Ireland, do like David mentioned, workshops. In Finland, they had workshops in Croke Park. It was awesome. Should I come back home and maybe the laundry is a mess, and I say someone should have done the laundry? What am I saying? Yes, it's an implicit way of showing expectation, but not being explicit about it. It's a passive aggressive response. The report should be on time. What am I asking people to do? Should moves away from active to passive communication, and it's not very effective when you want to influence others. Right? So every time you use should, you're actually having a request, right? You're having a request, but you're moving away from putting that request on the open to making it more implicit. Instead of saying, oh, I expected you to do that, I'm saying somebody should have done that. Who is that somebody, right? So should dilutes your ability to influence others by making you being more passive aggressive and more active. And again, not a good place to be for a product person. Let's jump to that. I'm just mindful of the time. I can talk about this forever. Don't. Think about don't. Don't forget to hand the report in time. Don't forget to complete your timesheets on time. Don't forget to pack lunch. Don't forget to don't run into the road, Charlie. Don't hit your brother, Tal. What's the problem with don't? Why, try, but, should, don't. This is a bit more devious, the don't. So don't think of a green elephant now. Anybody thinking of a green elephant? Because you're not supposed to. You do not want to think of a green elephant. In other words, our minds thinks in every time we think of something, we create that thing. We cannot not create it. So when you're saying don't be late, you're actually implying lateness. Don't hit your brother. You're actually implying go hit your brother, right? Don't forget. You're implying forgetfulness, right? Don't bully. Oh, I love that. In schools, you see, do not bully, right? You're actually saying, hey, let's bully everyone. So when we're saying don't, we're assuming, we're creating that thought. Just like I'm asking you, don't think of a green elephant. So if you want to be a powerful influencer, you want to convey what it is you want to see, the behavior you want to see. Stay on the sidewalk rather than, hey, don't run into the road. With children, it's even more nefarious because young children up until the age of 5 and 6, when you say them don't, and they hit their brother or siblings, you think that they're doing that because they're evil or bad, but it couldn't be further from the truth. The thing is, with young children, is the separation between cognition and behavior hasn't been completed. And they first create a thing in their mind, and then they do it, and only then do they say, "Oh, I wasn't supposed to do that." It's almost like I'll say now, "Hey, don't look to the side." And as you grow up, you know that immediate response. But some of you might have that can't see you. Some of you might, your eyes, your pupils might have darted to the side, because we still have that. Like don't bite your lip, right? And immediately we're thinking of biting our lips, and some people will do like this, just because the difference, right? That there's this gap that closes, that kind of widens over the years, but it's very tight when you're very, very young. And we say someone don't, they'll think they've created and then they'll do it. And only then, like in retrospect, 5-10 seconds after, oh, we weren't supposed to do that. So for example, if you tell developers, hey, don't keep your branches out for more than 5 days, you'll suddenly have those branches of code sitting alone for 2, 3, 4 weeks or a month. It's better to say you need to check the branch back in daily, hourly. And it's a recurring pattern. You want to move away from. I'm not saying these words are fine. Just know what's happening when you're using them and how they dilute your ability to influence. Okay, so I want to summarize a lot of those thoughts and to give you some lasting thoughts, and then open up for questions about what you could do differently with this second tip. So the first thing you want to do is create empathy. And you do empathy and create trust. Example, I've given some examples before. You cannot create trust in a meeting with 12 people on Zoom. You cannot. In a meeting with 10, 12 people on Zoom, trust is out the window. The only way to create trust is to create small groups of conversation. Your role as a product owner, product manager, is to create the structure that supports that. Hint, look again, Liberating Structures. I had the QR code over there. Join one of my workshops. I have a few in Europe and the US. I'll mention more about them. So create the structure to support decision making. There is no trust in a meeting with 12 people for an hour chatting about something. Again, harder to do in remote environment and still doable. and that is use mirroring. How can I use mirroring in emails? And that goes back to using same words. Well, if someone sends you an email with a certain formatting, people use a formatting. Some people say, hello, Michael. Some people use Michael, comma. Some people say, hi, Michael. Some people say, dear Michael. That's the format. Can I mirror the format? Well, I can use my own format, or I can use theirs. They're using theirs. They like theirs, so I can use theirs as well. If I want to interact and build trust with them, they'll see that I'm using their format. Format is big, by the way. Again, you notice it's not the words that I use, it's the formatting that I use. If people don't use a lot of exclamation marks, maybe they don't like exclamation marks. Why would I use my preference of using exclamation marks? This seems like, oh, how would that influence someone? That's exactly where influence lies. It's in the context, in the subtext, not in the text, not in the content. Again, harder in remote environments, easier in face-to-face environments, is putting things out there. Right. And again, you might want to do it in smaller teams and breakouts rather than big teams. So if you have someone who's completely against you, never, ever, or in other words, always do it in small meetings. So if you have a meeting of 12, right, and you're finding halfway through the meeting it's going like awry, totally bad, then hey, let's do a breakout, and you put yourself in a breakout with that person and have the conversation with them during the meeting as a one-on-one in breakouts. Breakouts are awesome. Use them a lot. So if that person is upset, label the feeling, call them out in a one-on-one breakout through the big meeting. Hey, I noticed that it seemed that you're not very happy with. Always preempt with seems, because maybe you're wrong. And they'll say, yeah, blah, blah, blah. And then you're addressing their unhappiness. You're addressing their feelings. You're giving credence. That's how you build trust. You give credence to their feeling. If someone says, or somebody in a meeting and so on, and you want to agree, summarize all the points. Like halfway through the meeting, you hear a lot of things, summarize in 3 bullets orally, maybe put it in writing and saying, that's right. And ask people, is that the summary? And then you want to say, yeah, a thumbs up is not enough. You want to hear verbally, you want to hear people say, yeah, that's right. So if you want to get to agreement, and it's a very important meeting with 4 senior executives, do small breakouts, come back, summarize what they said, and have them say, yeah, that's right, that's what we mean. Because that verbal acknowledgement is extremely powerful, especially in remote virtual settings. Another one of those tricks that I like to use a lot is, again, if you move the meeting away from a yes or no, remember, you want to have meetings that assume that the decision has already been made rather than a yes or no meeting. And that's a bit of creativity that you want to develop. Remember, you can do that in smaller groups and then in bigger ones. And then if something that is let's say an executive came up with something out of the blue, you're like, oh, how would they ever, you had this great idea, you presented it, 7 people, you even did some breakouts, you came back and you're back there, and then your topmost executive that you need hinges all your product roadmap for the next 15 years, right? Sorry, and it's like the feature you want to put down, the outcome, right? The outcome-based features you have for the next 9 months, you present that, and then your senior executive says blah, 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 blah in front of like 15 people, and you're oh my God, what just happened? The right response would be, of course, to first stop. Remember that. It's remote environments. You need to stop, take a deep breath, and maybe you have a cheat sheet with responses you have written down. That's the nice thing, Rabbi. You don't see the paper that I might have here with everything I want to tell you, right? That's lovely. That's one of the benefits, the shortcuts you have in remote environments. One of the best responses would be to, okay, how am I supposed to do that? Probably the last thing I'm going to share with you today. How am I supposed to do that? How am I supposed to do that? Immediately throws back the cognitive load to that person. Think about that. They've just given you an awful something. You don't know how am I supposed to do that? And now they need to come up with a response. That's very, very powerful. And maybe you're like, how am I supposed to do that? And they'll say, well, I'm not so sure. Okay, let's do that on a one-on-one later on in a meeting. I want to answer some of your questions, so I'll stop here, even though there's a few other things. I mentioned this, so I do liberating structure, short 2-hour session. This is one that's with Procognita. It's an agile company out of Poland. I'll do one in Germany in December as well. I have a few in the US. If you're interested, reach out to me or just grab the QR code. This one is definitely happening in a month or so. And we teach this liberating structure thing, and I think I'm convinced it will help you create structures that support decision making in your interactions. All right, I have 5 minutes, I think. Let's do this first. Do you have any tips on how to understand the subject, what's happening, rather than the text? Yes, listen. Yes. Hey, David, you're back there. How are you?
I am indeed, Michael. Sorry, I just wanted to say, first of all, great talk. Thank you very much. I saw a few questions come in there, so I think we have time for a couple. So yeah, we'll start with this one. Do you have any tips on how to understand the subtext of what's happening rather than the text?
Yeah, practice. So first off, practice on outside of work. Practice, write down, and then read out loud with the person you're practicing with. That's very powerful if you think about that, right? And people who you can trust, of course, and maybe that's not your people at work, because you need to learn subtext. By the way, the same things with remote environments. You need to learn subtext by getting feedback. It's all about feedback. If you're just thinking it and it's not true, you need somehow to get a feedback and to correlate what you're thinking is going on with what is actually going on. You can only do that with people you trust. Hope that helps.
Great, and thank you for the question. Okay, just another one come in. This is around liberating structures. I think you mentioned. Can you share an example? Can you share an example of liberating structures in action?
Sure. So first off, the easiest just to go to my YouTube channel and see all the 2 minute, 3 minute that I'm talking about. One of them is 1-2-4 all is like this on building structures YouTube video. You can put that. We can share somehow. I don't know. Go on my LinkedIn page and befriend me, and then we'll get from there. I'll give you an example. I think the overarching, like this meta structure is 1-2-4 all. So let's say there is an important question you need to respond. So you start by saying, let's like I did here, but I didn't have the breakout, unfortunately. Let's say there's a very powerful question you want to ask people. One of my favorites, if you had to be 10% bolder, how would you change your team? I've just done that last week with a team I'm working with. If you would want to be 10 times bolder, how would you change your team? And then you let, okay, people, think about that for 2 minutes and write down on paper. So that's the one. Now the two, you break them into pairs and you give them like 5 minutes to discuss that and see some similarities and get some either people ideas for 5 minutes, breakout rooms. Then and it's a group of 12, it's lovely. Then you do a meeting of 4, and the 4 are the 2 pairs meeting the other 2 other pairs in some breakouts. In Zoom, it's very easy to do that. Well, it's not very easy, but it is easy. And then they come with what they've just discussed in the pairs into a group of 4, and they share. And you ask that group of 4 to summarize. Hey, if we were 10 times bolder, like how would we change a team? And now the groups of 4 will come back to the main room, and each group of 4 will present their findings. And then I'll couple that with a 15% solution liberating structure, which the question would be, okay, so that's like 10 times bolder. 15% solution within what you have right now, this current structure, the current policies, the current resources. What is something that you can do immediately? That's your 15% solution. Again, you do that in breakout, and then people come back with their 15% solution they can commit. By the way, it's a lovely agile perspective if you want to do that. So that's an example for 2 liberating structures, 1, 2 for all, coupled with 15% solutions. Just go on my YouTube channel to find all of those explained like in 2-minute bits or 3-minute bits of videos.
Great. So I guess they're influencing each other in small groups as well, and gradually bringing it back to the large
That's
group.
the essence. Always small groups when we do remote, and also in face-to-face. Like if you want to manage your influence, you do that through smaller room interactions.
Perfect. So Michael, we're just about up on time. Just if anyone has any follow-up questions or would like to learn more about you, your work, how can they find you? We lost Michael, did we?
Away from noise. Oh, I'm still here.
You're back. You're back. Sorry, we lost you there. Yeah.
So I'm saying maybe we'll see each other face to face 2022. One can only hope.
Hopefully so. Yeah, we can practice liberating structures face to face, perhaps as well there as well. So, listen, Michael, always a pleasure to hear from you, and we'll see you around hopefully very soon.
Hopefully. Thanks, David, for having. Great conference. Really appreciate it. What you put here together, and the lineup of speakers is amazing. So hopefully see you face to face. Until next time.
Thanks, Michael.
And thanks for all the participants. Love it.